Hey kids, Peter from Panda here. Hey, I want to show you my Henge Dock for the MacBook Pro. And this MacBook Pro here is a generation old. So this is the previous model. It's a little bit larger, a little bit different size of the current MacBook. But Henge Dock, which makes these vertical docking stations for MacBooks, and one of the few that make docking stations, makes one for this version, and as you can see, it's white plastic. What I think is interesting is that for the newer MacBooks, the Henge Dock itself is in a silver to kind of match the brushed aluminum silver case for the new MacBooks, but in this case it's just a shiny smooth white plastic. I'm not going to go over the details on how to set this up, but I wanted to give you my thoughts after using this thing for several months. So the cool thing about it is it does a pretty good job of being a dock and removing desk clutter when the Apple Macs don't have an official dock. So if you're familiar with Lenovo's, or some of the Acers have docking stations which kind of plug in, have port replication capability, and they are kind of meant, even the Lenovo docks have a power button so you can turn it on and off. This doesn't have any of this because it's kind of a hack for making a docking station. What I mean by that is that there is no docking port. And so actually one of the things that I'll show you here is to keep in mind is that once you drop the laptop into the docking station here, you have installed basically all your cables in a fixed position here to match up with the ports on your MacBook. And so why it's kind of a little bit of a hack is that by dropping it in and being guided by the docking station, you're just kind of plugging in all your USB drive ports and everything into the USB ports, the plugs into the ports, by dropping it in and being guided by the docking station itself. You're not plugging it into one kind of major plug that's going to connect to all of your devices. So that's one thing. The second thing, by doing that, is you actually have the resistance of 4 or 5 different plugs that are holding the MacBook in place. So getting it out, if you were just to pull it out, it's going to take the whole dock with it. So what you end up having to do is using kind of the flange here on the foot to hold it down and kind of pull the MacBook out, and that actually can be kind of tough. So it's not a quick grab and go solution. This is really it's more convenient for using your laptop in kind of a desktop replacement mode, in my humble opinion. And you can see how these cords, you plug it into the MacBook once it's in the dock, and then you have these little screws that you use an Allen wrench to kind of squeeze them in place to hold them in place. So the key is you got to put the MacBook in, plug in all the plugs and power cords that you want, screw them in place, and that's kind of a done deal. You might have to adjust them a little bit because some of them get a little fiddly, or they weren't right in the perfect position. And when you pull it out, they kind of move into their final resting position. So you might have to do a little tinkering. The other thing that I've noticed, my other criticism, is that Macs don't seem to have, or at least I have not been able to find in the OS, a setting to control how they behave when you close the lid. So by default, when you close the MacBook lid, it kind of goes to sleep. On Windows, you're familiar with, you can go to the settings and choose an action of what happens when I close the lid, and you can set it to suspend, hibernate, shut down, do nothing. And in most cases, if you're going to use a dock like this, you would just set it to do nothing. I have not found that on the Mac. And so what I ended up having to do was download a program called No Sleep. I believe it's a free little app that you put on, but what it does is it prevents the laptop from going to sleep when you close it up. Why is that important, Pete? Well, the reason is, if a Mac is connected to an external display through like the DVI port, and you close the lid, it's smart enough to say you're using an external monitor, so I'm not going to go to sleep. The problem is, if I'm using my Mac and I want to put it in my dock and connect to my external display, which I do here, you're going to have your Mac open, and you're going to close it, and at that point you can't have anything plugged in because it's going to have to go into the dock. So as soon as I close it, the Mac all of a sudden goes into hibernation, and when you put it in, if you're quick enough, then it's going to read that there's another device or an external monitor, and maybe come back on, maybe not. It's kind of a spot hot. There are some other hacks, quote unquote hacks out there, like share the internet connection all the time and prevent sleeping when the internet connection is being shared. I tried those things. It's not always perfect because for some reason it's not always sharing the internet connection. I don't really understand. No sleep works, but then the drawback of that is when I take this out and close the monitor or close the screen in the clamshell, like I'm going on the road, it never sleeps. And so you have to remember to manually go in and change that when you actually do want the Mac to sleep. So, you know, there are some integration pieces, particularly on the software side, that are missing to really make this kind of a seamless, really usable dock. The nice thing is it's actually very attractive. To hold the MacBook in a vertical position like this is a real space saver on the desk, especially given how wide Macs are. It doesn't really matter how slim they are if they're sitting there. You know, one of the things to consider, and that I have been considering, is whether I would want to use my laptop with a dock as opposed to just getting something like a Mac Mini for my desktop use, and then just keep the laptop as kind of a separate device. So that's kind of the other option. Again, these docks aren't very expensive, somewhere in the ballpark of $100. They come with everything you need, the Allen keys, the screws. It even comes with some adapters for depending on which generation of MagSafe connector you have. So you have everything you need to kind of get deployed right out of the box. But like I said, the key is not, or my issue is not so much the hardware. The key is how are you going to handle kind of the software limitations, because the Mac isn't really designed for a dock and isn't expecting a dock. It's just kind of reading your actions based on what is normally happening when you close the clamshell, when you disconnect it from a power supply, disconnect it from an external VGA cable. So something to keep in mind, especially if you're using, obviously you're going to be using an external keyboard with that. And then the other thing I'll throw out there is that, you know, when you do that, you put it in, you get it, boot it back up. Sometimes you got to tap the keyboard to reconnect, etc., etc. So, you know, some options with it, but it would be nice to see a really official dock. There is another docking piece that I have, or a docking device that I've seen, where you just plug into your USB drive, and then that USB drive has its own little port replicator to connect to a monitor and USB drives and things like that. That might be something worth checking out too. The only difference is there you'd have to plug in your USB port replicator, but then and the power cord as well. So you'd be plugging in two different things as opposed to just dropping the laptop in one motion. So I like the Henge Dock stations. They're great. I just wish the ecosystem were a little bit better around it. So Peter von Panda, out.